You already know what you should do with your money. You've heard it before. Spend less than you earn. Invest early. Stay consistent. Build an emergency fund. Stop buying things you don't need. The rules aren't complicated. Most people could write them down from memory. And yet most people aren't following them. That's the part nobody wants to talk about. Because if the problem were simply a lack of knowledge, the solution would be simple. Read a book, watch a video, take a course. But the real problem isn't what you know. The real problem is what your brain does when it's time to act on what you know. There is a psychological trap buried inside the way you think about money. And it doesn't care how intelligent you are. It doesn't care how much you've read or how many finance podcasts you've listened to. It operates beneath the surface of your decisions, in the quiet space between knowing the right thing to do and actually doing it. And it is the single biggest reason most people never build lasting wealth. The trap has a name. Behavioral economists call it the intention-action gap, the distance between what you intend to do and what you actually do. And when it comes to money, that gap is wider than most people ever realize. Richard Thaler, a University of Chicago economist who won the Nobel Prize for his work in behavioral economics, spent decades studying this exact problem. What he found wasn't that people lacked willpower or discipline. What he found was that human beings are fundamentally irrational in predictable, measurable, and repeatable ways. Your brain runs on cognitive shortcuts, mental rules of thumb that evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. Those shortcuts were extraordinarily useful when your ancestors needed to make fast decisions about survival. They are not useful when you're trying to decide whether to max out your retirement account or spend that money on something that feels urgent right now. Your brain is not wired for long-term thinking. It is wired for now. This is the first layer of the trap. Psychologists call it present bias, the tendency to overvalue what's in front of you today and undervalue what's waiting for you in the future. When you imagine your retirement, you're imagining a version of yourself who feels distant and abstract, almost like a different person. And your brain treats that future version of you accordingly, as someone less real, less deserving, less worth sacrificing for. Hal Hershfield, a behavioral scientist at UCLA, ran a series of experiments to test this. He showed participants digitally aged photos of themselves, versions of their own face decades into the future, and then asked them to make financial decisions. The participants who saw their future selves allocated significantly more money to retirement savings than those who hadn't seen the images. Simply making the future version of themselves feel more real changed the financial decisions they made in the present. Think about what that means. Your financial future isn't just a math problem. It's a relationship problem. And right now, you might be neglecting that relationship. Present bias doesn't just affect how much you save. It affects every money decision you make. It's the reason you tell yourself you'll start investing next month, next paycheck, after the holidays, after this one expense clears. The future always feels like a safer time to sacrifice. The present always feels like an exception. But here's what present bias doesn't show you. Every month you delay is not a neutral act. It has a cost, a real, measurable cost that grows with time. Consider this. If you invest $500 a month starting at age 25 and you earn a historical average return of roughly 8% per year, you will have accumulated approximately $1.7 million by the time you reach 65. If you wait until age 35 to start, just 10 years later, that same $500 a month at the same return gives you approximately $745,000. The 10-year delay doesn't cost you 10 years of wealth. It costs you nearly $1 million. The gap between those two numbers isn't caused by a lack of income or intelligence. It's caused by present bias, the quiet, invisible cost of choosing now over later, again and again. But present bias is only one layer of the trap. There is another force working against you, and this one might be even harder to escape. It's called loss aversion. Daniel Kahneman, the psychologist who won the Nobel Prize in economics in 2002 for his work on human judgment and decision-making, demonstrated through decades of research that losses feel approximately twice as powerful as equivalent gains. Losing $100 doesn't feel like the opposite of gaining $100. Losing $100 feels roughly twice as bad as gaining $100 feels good. Your brain is not running a balanced calculation. It is running a heavily biased one. And that bias shapes your financial behavior in ways you probably haven't noticed. Quick interruption. One small financial mistake repeated for years can quietly reshape an entire future. If you'd like a practical roadmap for avoiding those mistakes and building long-term financial freedom, check out my book, Financial Freedom Blueprint. You'll find the link in the description below. Now let's continue. Loss aversion is why you hold losing investments too long. Selling feels like making the loss real. As long as you haven't sold, some part of your brain is still hoping the situation will reverse. This is what behavioral economists call the disposition effect, the documented tendency of investors to sell winning investments too early and hold losing investments too long. The exact opposite of what rational investing would suggest. Loss aversion is why market downturns cause so much panic selling. When your portfolio drops 20%, the emotional weight of that number isn't proportional to the actual financial impact. It feels catastrophic. And under that kind of emotional pressure, people sell, locking in real losses right before a recovery that would have restored their gains. J.P. Morgan analyzed the returns of individual investors over a 20-year period, ending in 2020. The average individual investor earned just 2.9% per year. The S&P 500 returned approximately 7.5% per year over the same period. The market was right there. The opportunity was available to everyone. But the average person significantly underperformed it. The gap between what the market offered and what most people actually captured wasn't caused by bad investments. It was caused by emotional decisions, selling when fear peaked and buying when confidence peaked, which is precisely backwards from what produces wealth. Knowing this doesn't automatically protect you from it. That's the cruel part of the trap. You can understand loss aversion completely, be able to explain it to someone else in detail, and still feel it overwhelm your rational thinking the next time your portfolio drops. Knowledge and behavior are not the same thing. There is a third layer to this trap, and it might be the most socially invisible of all. It's called lifestyle inflation, and it doesn't feel like a trap when it's happening to you. It feels like a reward. Your income rises. Naturally, your spending rises with it. A better apartment, a newer car, better restaurants, nicer vacations. These don't feel like financial mistakes. They feel like progress. You earned more, so you're enjoying more. That seems fair. But lifestyle inflation has a mathematical consequence that most people don't confront until it's too late. Every permanent increase in your spending is a permanent increase in the wealth you need to sustain your lifestyle. When you upgrade your standard of living, you're not just spending more today. You're adding to the amount you'll need to have saved before you can stop working. Thomas Stanley, who spent decades researching American millionaires and documented his findings in The Millionaire Next Door, discovered something that became deeply counterintuitive to many readers. The people who looked wealthy, who lived in large houses in upscale neighborhoods, who drove luxury cars and wore expensive clothes, were often not the ones who actually had wealth. The ones who actually had wealth were often the ones who drove modest cars, lived in ordinary neighborhoods, and spent considerably less than they earned, even at high income levels. The appearance of wealth and the reality of wealth are frequently opposites. Lifestyle inflation traps you because it never feels like a trap. It feels like success. And once you upgrade your life, the idea of downgrading feels like loss. Loss aversion kicks in again. Now you're not just failing to build wealth, you're psychologically anchored to a spending level that keeps wealth at arm's length. These three forces, present bias, loss aversion, and lifestyle inflation, do not operate in isolation. They reinforce each other. You delay investing because the future feels distant. When the market drops, you sell because losses feel unbearable. And as your income grows, your spending grows with it, shrinking the gap between what you earn and what you keep. The trap becomes self-reinforcing. And because it operates mostly beneath conscious awareness, most people never clearly identify it as the source of their financial struggles. So what actually breaks the trap? The first shift is structural, not motivational. Motivation fades. Systems don't. Richard Thaler's most important contribution to public policy was the insight that the way choices are presented dramatically changes the choices people make. When companies automatically enrolled employees in retirement plans, instead of asking them to opt in, participation rates jumped dramatically, not because people changed their beliefs about saving, because the default changed. The system did the work that willpower couldn't sustain. You can build your own version of this. Automate your investments before the money ever appears in your checking account. If you never see the money, your present biased brain never gets the chance to spend it. Automation doesn't require discipline. It makes discipline unnecessary. The second shift is perceptual. Make the future more real. Hal Hershfield's research showed that simply visualizing your future self changes your behavior toward it. Write down what you want your financial life to look like in 20 years. Calculate exactly how much you would need to have saved for that to be true. Assign a number to the future rather than leaving it abstract. Abstract futures feel optional. Concrete ones feel like obligations. The third shift is environmental. If lifestyle inflation is your specific trap, the solution isn't to endure the pain of spending less. The solution is to redefine what feels like progress. Stanley's research showed that the wealthy weren't suffering with modest lifestyles. They had simply built a different relationship with money, one where accumulation was the status signal, not consumption. Wealth is the freedom to not worry about money. That's the thing worth building toward. And it looks nothing like what most advertising tells you it looks like. The financial knowledge has always been available. The math isn't complicated. The strategies are well documented. What has been missing, for most people, for most of their financial lives, is an understanding of why they consistently choose against their own long-term interests. Now you understand it. The trap isn't that you don't know what to do. The trap is that your brain was built for a world that no longer exists, a world where the future was uncertain enough that prioritizing the present made survival sense. You don't live in that world anymore, but your brain still runs the same operating system. The people who build lasting wealth aren't the ones who fight that operating system through sheer force of willpower. They're the ones who stop fighting it and start designing around it, automating what motivation can't maintain, making the future feel real enough to act for, refusing to let a rising income become a rising obligation. You already knew what you should do with your money. Now you know why you haven't been doing it, and exactly what to change. If you enjoyed this video and want to go deeper, I've created a collection of books covering money psychology, wealth building systems, and financial freedom. Whether you're trying to improve your mindset, build better financial habits, or create a roadmap toward long-term wealth, you'll find something useful. Check out Investor Mindset Reset, Money Systems That Build Wealth, and Financial Freedom Blueprint, using the links in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.